vamos a empezar. Vamos a conectar con esta primera mesa, que es el rol de los pacientes en las diversas publicaciones. Y vamos a tener un maestro de ceremonias tremendo, ¿eh?
Sí, sí, tanto. El doctor Xavier Carné, vamos a un buen aplauso.
Un aplauso para el doctor Carné, por favor. Que le vamos a ceder aquí su trono para que a través de la pantalla pueda ver a todos los ponentes que van a intervenir en esta primera mesa.
Acordaros que va a ser en inglés, por lo tanto, sobre todo la que no tenga, que lo vaya a buscar, dijéramos para hacer la traducción, la que lo necesite o la que no lo necesite. Bueno, yo voy a presentar al doctor Xavier Carné. Xavier Carné, aparte de ser profesor Carné, aparte de ser un gran amigo, es de los mejores farmacólogos clínicos del mundo, es médico especialista en farmacología clínica. Para mí es un gran farmacólogo clínico, es un gran honor. Él, por decir 4 cosas de su currículum vitae, se formó en medicina interna en Belviche, hizo farmacología clínica en el Hospital del Valle d'Hebron, fue jefe clínico en el Hospital del Valle d'Hebron y después se trasladó al Hospital Clínico de Barcelona, que ha sido durante muchos años jefe del servicio de farmacología clínica del Hospital Clínico de Barcelona, como sabéis, son los mejores hospitales de investigación a nivel nacional. Presidente del Comité Olímpico, presidente del Comité Ético, Comité Ético de Ensayos Clínicos del Clínic de Barcelona. Ha estado 4 años de presidente de la Comisión Nacional de Evaluación de Medicamentos en la Agencia Española de Medicamento y ha sido también el responsable de la línea ECRIN, que es la línea europea de ensayos clínicos independientes patrocinadas por las agencias de medicamentos. Por lo tanto, es una gran autoridad, además es paciente, o sea que mejor imposible como nosotros. Y bueno, y yo creo que va a quedar muy bien la mesa. Y tú mismo, Xavi, adelante y muchas gracias por estar aquí. Te agradezco mucho que hayas venido. Gracias, Xavier.
Gracias. As you know, we start speaking English now. So welcome to the OAFI Congress, to you from all over where you are. So the first roundtable, I must tell you that it should be quite limited in time. So all of you have around 6-7 minutes. It's about a topic that I think is on the title, I could say that it's a little bit contradictory, because the role of the patients in peer review publications. Peer review traditionally has been considered the system when a scientific paper is presented to publishing, somebody else that is not involved in the research, but at the same level, peer review means expert on the field, is criticizing the paper before publishing. So it's a little bit contradictory if you think that the patient that is not a peer, is not an expert on the field, at least theoretically, should intervene in this task. But for that reason, it's an interesting topic, and I think, for me at least, will be very, very enlightening. For that, we have 3 important persons. First, Ciaran, I think the pronunciation is right, Ciaran Fitzpatrick, editor of BMC Medicine, Biomedical Central Medicine. He has been involved and committed in promoting science and open access platforms since many years. Thank you, Ciaran. Then also we have Dr. Sophia Davis, also is an experienced editor here in the Lancet Psychiatry, where she has been involved in bridging perspective from humanities and science. And finally, Jean Taylor, living with rheumatoid arthritis for more than 30 years and osteoarthritis also recently, 10 years, not bad. And she's a passionate advocate for patients' involvement in research. So for me, at least, the topic is very interesting, very new. So I will ask you to stand for 5, 6, 7 minutes, your presentation, and then we will have the opportunity to some questions and debate for 5, 10 minutes more. That's not much, but I think that you can keep in time. Thank you. So first, the floor is for you, Ciaran, please.
Okay, everyone. It's great to be here this morning, again, talking at OAFI. I hope you can see my PowerPoint presentation slide.
Perfectly.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a great shame that I can't be there today. I had a great time last year meeting everyone. So yeah, let's get started on the role of the patient in the peer review publication. So my name's Ciaran Fitzpatrick. I'm a senior editor at BMC Medicine. Previously, when I spoke at OAFI, I was editor of BMC Musculoskeletal Disorders and BMC Rheumatology. And I did most of my work in PPI there. I'm still working on it, but moved to BMC Medicine. We're part of the BMC Biomed Central brand, which is owned by Springer Nature. So open access publishing, I think it's important to take a step back and sort of cast a net to what that is. So it basically is free to read and reuse by everyone, which is really important for the public and publishers. Researchers publishing their paper paying a fee before publication so everyone can read it. And Biomed Central, we were the first publisher trying out open access, and look at all the other competitors now. I don't have any conflicts of interest. I'm pro PPI and research, patient and public involvement, and I have a cooperative relation with many patient organizations and partners. And I had the pleasure to meet OAFI and Josep in 2019 at EULAR, and I wrote that clinical practice needs to be geared towards the needs of patients. And when I spoke in Barcelona in 2020, I gave some recommendations for publishers looking ahead. And that was really inspired by the BMC journal Research Involvement and Engagement and the organization Patients Included. I really recommend you check them out. And that was, I broke it up into one, respect, having inclusive language guidance towards everyone, including in patients. So we're respectful, open, and we're not discrimination. Super easy stuff. Make it easier to understand for everyone. And that would be plain language summaries, patient reviewers, patient editorial board members. Maybe there's a mentorship program by academics. And also for us as publishers, setting structure. So setting specific editorial policies, checklists to ensure good reporting, such as GRIP2, processes that ensure that researchers are making paper quite patient and public friendly, and just that researchers or academics are more aware of PPI and why it's important to have PPI included. And so, yeah, what tools do we have at BMC or any journal to advance it? Quickly, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to send my slides around later, so you're welcome to really go in depth and contact me. But a journal, most important, to have submission guidelines, the aim, a scope. We have a collection here on the left-hand side, journal metrics here, impact factors, quite important, article downloads, and so on and so forth. Other features of a journal, transparent peer review or a peer review process. We publish all our peer review reports, correspondence between the editor, reviewer, and author. Or people can choose to include their names if they want. And we have special issues that highlight content to engage our community. Here was a really good one on osteoarthritis. A speaker last year at OAFI is included there. And we've even had OAFI publishing a few of these special issues. So why am I including this as well as my recommendations? I talked previously about having editorial policies, and for a journal, for us, we need to have this all written in stone, like the 10 Commandments, and then we follow them religiously to ensure that everything is being followed. And if we don't have these policies written down, we just don't follow them because we're very systematic. But the good thing about special issues, you could set specific conditions and rules. And then you make a call for papers, and all the papers published make a special issue. So you make special conditions, and then with that, it was our plan to make a patient and public involvement call for papers to show it was feasible, to show that it can be successful, and then we can expand it across Springer Nature, BMC. So advancing PPI, we wanted to make actions based on our wish list. A word on Stringer Nature, we are becoming intentionally inclusive. We have waivers for people who cannot afford open access fees. We're being mentorship programs. We have diversity, equity and inclusion in recruitment of all sorts, including peer review. And we have inclusive language guidance for audits coming out in the next month or so, which I'll be happy to share with OAFI. So in June 2021, we set up a PPI in rheumatic and musculoskeletal conditions across those two journals, a whole host of excellent academics and 2 patient partners as special issue editors. We set it up as a pilot study, meaning that and I've talked about this already in my talk, that we wanted authors to follow our special rules to show that PPI was possible at a journal by having a public referee, reviewer, including patients or caregiver, plain language summaries, GRIP 2 checklist to show that people were speaking in a respectful manner, reporting PPI as they should in a reproducible manner. And we also did commission lots of patient partner work. Marketing was really focused to educate researchers on this. We had focus groups with our editorial board member. We had Twitter feedback from lots of patient partners just to make sure everyone had a voice on this. We had a special patient and public reviewer project, meaning that we had 15 people met, and yeah, we had academic reviewers, and we also had patient and public reviewers. And I was sort of mentoring them through. We met regularly. That's still ongoing, and this was taken from the established BMC journal, Research Involvement and Engagement, that has patients as co-editors with academics. So how's it going? I think it could be summarized, and I'm finishing. This is going to be my second last slide. The slow progress is still progress. Quitting won't make things any faster. So I think getting patients involved in publication or publishing in general is a slow business, unfortunately, but lots of learning, challenges and successes. So challenges, firstly, is we had 3 guest editors step down. We had patient reviewers being quite busy, unavailable for many reasons. We had delays in the papers that we did commission with patients or academics, so we had to extend the call for papers. Summarize, people are extremely busy. We probably got a lot more people say yes to us than other special issues or commission paper because they're so interested and engaged, but unfortunately people only have so much time. I moved to BMC medicine, so I haven't been able to fully focus on this important issue. And I think the other thing which was quite surprising, the lack of awareness amongst researchers, there's incorrect submissions, there's delays and just some manual work around because people are submitting, but it's not PPI because they just think because we have patients, that is PPI. To finish now, successes include, we've had 35 submissions, which is quite amazing. We've published 20 so far. They're really, really great. I'm going to share a link afterwards so you can go check it out. We had a lot of patient-driven pieces that have been published. I've one highlight on the next slide, which will be my final one. Lots of learning opportunities for researchers, such as like how-to guides for early career researchers. And finally, excellent public reviewers. We've maybe 20 reports based on 40 invitations, and authors have been very good to follow good PPI guidelines. So green is where we've been successful. Yellow, we're still working, a lot to be done. And yeah, thank you for your thoughts or listening to me. I hope you've been able to, I've stayed within the time. And if you just Google PPI BMC, you'll find our special issue. And my email's at the end, and I will share these slides around. I'm going to hopefully be able to stop sharing my screen, which I've done. So back to you, Xavier.
Thanks, Ciaran, for being so synthesizing. Now, Sophia, that's your floor. Please try to be short in 5, 6, 7 minutes. Thank you.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, hi, thanks Thanks for that first talk, Ciaran. I'm the senior editor at Lancet Psychiatry. So because this is a specific field that's maybe different from what you're dealing with, I just want to spend a few moments talking about psychiatry first before moving on to our involvement of people with lived experience. So just trying to, there we go. So we published a piece on the future of psychiatry back in 2017, saying really that we need to involve experiential first-hand knowledge in psychiatry, in how research is done. So people with lived experience have valuable insights that are really just as important as those from researchers and clinicians, we believe. And you mentioned at the beginning that it sounds almost contradictory to say patients involved in peer review, and we would say that patients bring their own type of expertise. So you could think of them as experts by experience. And this is why they're so important to listen to. And, you know, these can be lay people who are not involved in research at all. It can also be clinicians and academic researchers who also have their own experience of, for us, mental illness or being involved in services for mental health. So as I said, people who have their own experiences have their own unique insights, and we have to recognize that there is a power imbalance inherent within all clinical encounters. So the language and diagnoses that clinicians use is different to the language and experiences that people have. So particularly in psychiatry, you know, we don't have biomarkers by and large, and we're looking at symptoms assessed by a psychiatrist, and these symptoms are based on what people say, but people don't say the same things that the psychiatrists end up saying. So someone who is classified by a psychiatrist as having hallucinations doesn't come in saying, I have hallucinations. They say, the world is strange. So for example, this is an inventory that is commonly used to assess depression. And, you know, it's a scale, and you end up with a score on the scale. But people experience conditions in all different ways. So the problem with these scales is that they don't necessarily track what someone is experiencing or what effect this experience has on their own identity, what meaning it has for them. And it doesn't track differences in culture. So there are various problems with these measurements, and definitely in the world of psychiatry, involving people with lived experience is becoming common at all levels of research. So funders want it, researchers want to include it, and we as a journal also want to include it. How do we do that? So we've been, this slide is just to say that it could be at different stages within the design of a research project. So for us, for the past few years, so since 2018, we've created a panel of service, we call them service users, so people who are using mental health services. Originally, it was 10 people that were recruited with the help of the McPinn Foundation, who are really into patient involvement in research. We did some training in peer review at our Lancet offices. And then the members of the panel completed a peer review training in Publons. At the moment, 6 of them are actively involved. So they review all types of papers for us, clinical trials, qualitative papers, reviews, sometimes more shorter commentaries. We don't ask them to review things like meta-analyses, where it's more on a meta level, but where we think that the voice of someone with lived experience is important, we invite them to review. So they're on the same level as the clinicians and statisticians that we invite to review papers. So we send it to them at the same time, and we look at everyone's comments together. And if we decide to pursue that paper and give those comments to the authors for them to revise their paper, they need to look at the service users' comments on just the same level as they need to look at the clinicians' comments. With this group of people, we meet with them. I'm the one who's sort of manages the group. So we meet them together every 4 times a year, and there we can discuss issues that they have or how they're feeling, things that we need to do differently. It's important to have a lot of engagement with them because they're people with their own needs, and we are going to do a refresher. I'm going to do a refresher training for them in the coming weeks, just to top up on address questions that they have and confidence that they have about doing peer review. We also pay them. I haven't put that on this form, but we think that's really important. They're not academics for whom peer review sort of helps to further their own career in a way, although obviously doing peer review is a burden on academics as well. But we think it's important to pay them for their time. And we're planning to expand. We've got the okay from the Lancet to expand the group, so we're hoping to recruit another 6 next year. And they give very useful comments about tone and language. Ciaran mentioned inclusive language, so they will address how language is being used to describe people. And they give very useful comments on the study design, for example, exclusion criteria that have been used for patients in a trial, or how a control group has been matched to the trial group, or what's called treatment as usual in a paper might not be what they've experienced as treatment as usual. And for them it's also empowering. So it's useful for them to do this for their own experience. And sometimes they're drawing on just their own experience. Sometimes they're people who are connected with a broader community, for example here, the autism community. And so that brings another perspective, which we really value. So I just want to say also that it's not about just ticking the box of, oh yeah, we involve them in our peer review process. We really, this is why we have the regular meetings with them. We really want to pay attention to how can we engage people with lived experience, experts by experience. How can we engage them in the process in a way that's deeply meaningful and that is useful? And so this is something that we actively think through as our own editorial team, and then together with our service user panel, and we try to address such questions as these. How can we address power dynamics? How could clinical practice change as a result? So I've tried to whiz through that, and thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to be involved in the questions later on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sophia. I think we'll have time for a couple of 3 questions. I have many. I will try to choose the most important one, representing the patient's view. Now we have the floor for a patient, Jane. Now the floor is yours for 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me. So just to give a bit of context, I'm a patient lived with 2 types of arthritis, RA for over 30 years, OA for 10 years, and also have osteoporosis like many long-term arthritis patients. I'm also associate editor, patient editor of the Journal of Research, Involvement and Engagement, which looks at good practice of involving patients, service users, other stakeholders in all fields of research, but primarily health research. So I'm going to be building on some of the points that Ciaran and Sophie have said. So can I have my first slide? Thanks. So that's just introducing me, but what I'm going to talk about is how we can invest more in the patient. Thank you. So why should they review? I think, you know, Sophie's covered some of that, so I'm not going to labor that, but really we're at a point now, certainly in the UK, where we're using patients in the whole of the research process, and we've been doing this for you know, 20, 30 years, it's just now becoming much more common. So we're using them at the start of the process to actually determine priorities. We're using them to review bids. We're using them to disseminate. So really, it makes sense that we're using them at the end of the process as well to peer review. Secondly, as Sophie said, you get a much better and a much broader amount of feedback for the researcher. So patients will bring complementary knowledge, they'll bring the lived experience. That's more likely to make the research more relevant, more appropriate. Patients can pick up, is this actually going to work in practice if it's a particular, say, an app or a program of self-management or exercise? Is the way of taking this treatment going to be acceptable, and so on? So it makes it much more valid. It makes the feedback to the researcher and the author much more valid. So it makes it more appropriate, more acceptable, more relevant. I've talked a bit there also about, the language. Patients are very good at seeing when involvement of patients in research and service users in research is tokenistic. So they're very good at picking that up. They're also very helpful in actually helping researchers to make the language clearer. And this is very important, particularly in the era we're in now, where we're much more into open science, transparency, and actually being able to help a researcher just, not even with the language, we're not talking about jargon, but we're talking about just shape the idea and tell the story of the research to actually make it much more accessible. So for all these things, patient researchers, user researchers are actually incredibly valuable to the writer of the study. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm just going to mention some of the issues in the current process. I've reviewed as a patient for many years, and as an associate editor, I find the same issues that my patient service user reviewers do. The first one is support and development. We need much more support and development for patient reviewers, because often they don't have, as Sophie said, the kind of academic infrastructure. They're not going to get any benefit particularly to themselves for this. So we need to ensure that there are other benefits in kind, that they feel supported. And patient reviewers just say, helping them use the system, the computer system, giving them feedback on their first review. Once you send a review out there, often they don't hear anything else. They don't know what's happened to it for months later. So just giving them that initial support. The research that's been done on looking at feedback from patient reviewers says they would like much more visual information and video of how to do it. A network of support, maybe having a buddy system, someone to take them through it. So creating that supportive environment so that people don't feel, very worried about it, and have they done the right thing. Second one, digital exclusion. That works in two ways. You need access to a computer and a technology and so on, and the internet to be able to participate as a patient reviewer. But even if you have that, it's not cheap, it's not free. Many people, particularly with arthritis, will have to print out articles to review them. They won't be able to kind of view them and work their hands in a normal way. So we don't pay them for this, and we should do. We should recognize that it isn't completely free. We need to support people to do this. And of course, digital exclusion also means that people who don't have access and who aren't digitally enabled because of where they live, because of money, because of mental health issues, all kinds of things mean that they're not being able to review. So we also have to think about whether or not we need to widen the net a bit and find other ways to bring people into the reviewer system. The system itself, set up for academics, and so not always user-friendly to patients. They don't always know how to access, they don't always know the language. And finally, matching patient reviewers to articles. That's something that comes up very strongly. keywords that journals use with the best will in the world aren't always set up for lay reviewers and patients and service users. So it can be very difficult to match people to the right article. We tend to expect patient reviewers to be very generalist about all aspects of health in a way that we wouldn't expect an academic to do that. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So just some ways that we can improve. So the first way I would suggest is that we co-create the guidance and resources with patients, that, you know, patients and service users, they're the ones that understand what is difficult for them about the process, even if it's just getting into the system. So I think we need to co-create guidance. And we've done some of that at the Journal of Research Involvement and Engagement. Look at reward and recognition for patient reviewers. I was practically jumping up and down when Sophie said that they pay their reviewers. We should be paying reviewers in some shape or form. And, you know, that's something to work out: who pays them, what do we pay them? But in the UK now, good practice is to pay reviewers who sit on funding panels and who do lay reviews. And we shouldn't be asking people to do this kind of work for free and expect them to continue to do it for free. Feedback. We need to ensure appropriate feedback mechanisms. People need to know that their review's been okay, that they, you know, that they've had feedback from the journal as well as from the writer. Improve access to digital, as I've said, so that we're not just limiting our reviews to the same people, that we're getting a broader range of reviews from people who are affected by the conditions and affected by the research, and who are ultimately going to be the users of the end products of this research. I mean, one thing that works very well is to create a buddy system or some kind of network for social support. So as Sophie said, even just meeting so many times a year, if you know there's some kind of network, there's other people in your position that you can contact, that's really useful. I mean, you know, as an associate editor, I'm a patient, I do it for free. But when I started, I had an academic buddy who does my role, Krisha, who's the academic editor associate. And we were on the phone to each other all the time, reassuring each other that, you know, we hadn't sent the wrong thing to the wrong person. And that just kept us both happy and kept us in the game, so to speak. So I think those kind of buddy systems, social networks are really important if we want to invest in reviewers and keep them with the journal, because, you know, good reviewers, good patient reviewers are really excellent. They're providing fantastic complementary feedback to the academics. So we do need to recognize where they're coming from and invest in them for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think we have time for 3 short burning questions for me, for you all, but just please answer quick because we have not much time. First question is, how do you solve the problem of the medical technicalities, the jargon? You know, medicine is full of acronyms. A friend of mine told me one day that studying medicine, part of it is studying acronyms. What means COPD and things like that? So, first question. Second question, how do you avoid the conflict of interest of patients' advocacy? Because could be some kind of interest, commercial interest, supporting patient advocates. How do you solve this? And third, recently we have had here in Barcelona a congress of people believing that the earth is flat. It was quite successful, a lot of people talking about it. So, of course, you need choose people with education, with an understanding of the scientific method. How do you solve these barriers, and how do you choose people who's not only prone, but also prepare to participate in the peer review? That's 3 quick questions for those of you who would like to answer.
I'd love to take the first one, Xavier. Just firstly, it's really great to be online with Jane and Sophie. Even since I've started with talking with OAFI, we're doing better, and we are advancing frontiers. The first one I think is pretty easy, actually. It's I think it's just get patients involved, or whether as authors, so that they're actually looking at the content or acting as reviewers, and whether they're involved or publishers are mandating researchers to making plain language summaries. So even if you can't have the full paper, I understand completely, like plain English, you can still have plain language summaries which are clearly explaining what happens. I do understand you can't always get those into other languages, Spanish or Catalan, for example, but I think that's a different issue.
Yeah, could I just pop in on that one as well? Because I think you can have jargon, but you can still have a narrative. You can still have your research written in quite a plain way. We're not asking people to give up on their scientific backgrounds. But it benefits everyone. It benefits other scientists if the article is written in clear language. It's much more inclusive for everyone. And generally, other scientists say, oh, you know, actually, they go to the lay summary first. They go to the plain English summary first in all contexts and say, oh, this is really useful. This is really helpful. So I think you can still improve the language without taking away the jargon.
And if I come in on that question as well, and this relates to one point that you made, Jane, about selecting the right person to send a paper to. So I know what all of my panel are interested in, and I know why they're interested in it. So if I have a paper that's on early psychosis, I'm going to send it to my panel member who has experience of psychosis. And this paper for her is not full of jargon. She understands it very well. So if you think about something as being full of jargon, you have to think that if you send it to someone who has experience of that condition, for them, they're quite familiar with the jargon. They are experts also. So I don't think they're too put off by the jargon if you send it to the right person.
Thank you.
And as for maybe just while I've got the mic, on the point about people who believe the Earth is flat. So we selected our reviewers, the members of our service user panel, and we gave them training in how to do peer review. Yes, they weren't trained in that before, but we gave them a decent training on it, and we gave them some more resources for how to do review, and so then we're trusting that they bring their experience. We don't need them to be scientists. We don't need them to be experts in the scientific method. We need them to bring their experience, and then we're still sending the paper to researchers, clinicians, statisticians. So if they did believe that the Earth was flat, it doesn't matter that they're just bringing their own experience, and that's what's crucial. So it doesn't matter if they don't fully understand the scientific method. That's okay. I don't need them to comment on the statistical design of a paper, although sometimes they make very astute comments on that, but that's not what we're looking for.
Could I come in on that last question about the flat earthers as well? I think we have to be careful of assuming that it's only patients and service users that may have strange ideas. Many scientists and researchers have those kind of ideas as well. And, again, as Sophie said, that other people are looking at this, but there is an assumption somehow that we should be holding often patients and service users to a much higher standard than we ask of researchers. So I think we do have to be careful of that. I know some scientists with very strange views, and I'm sure we all do. And they have a public forum, so I think it implies to everybody who's reviewing.
If somebody wants to make any question, please.
Yeah. Is the microphone working? Look, my name is Mel Kusi. I'm a sports physician, and I have had my share of presenting papers and also reviewing. And there is a whole world in all that. I think that I'm very grateful for your papers, but I was going to, if you like, frame it in the triple aspect of evidence-based medicine, which is, as you know, is scientific evidence, expert opinion, and patient expectation. And I would just wonder if you have considered or how it can be included into the tripod of evidence-based medicine, because in my opinion, the expert opinion and the patient expectation has been put to the side in many times in the process of peer review and accepting papers. And I wonder if you have any comments or any ideas on that point. Thank you. Any takers?
I'm a little bit unclear on the question.
Well, the question,
maybe that's what I see Sophie nodding also.
Well, what you have raised, in fact, is the third point of evidence-based medicine, which is patient expectation. And I wonder if you have a way of including it, because it has been generally forgotten in the acceptance of papers in scientific publications.
So you're asking how are we, or how do we think of including patient views into evidence-based medical publishing?
Well, more than views is expectations, which is one of the tripods of the original paper of evidence-based medicine.
I think we've outlined that. If I can say, I mean, if I can speak as the three of us, we're talking about getting patient reviewers involved. I think the Lancet Psychiatry talked about that. Like I talked about commissioning only patient co-productions or patient-led productions during the special issue, and I'm sure research involvement and engagement is a holy well for all of that. Maybe Jane, you could talk a little bit about RIE.
Yeah, I think that patient expectations do come into it, but I think there are more expectations in our journal of how the research should be done. So we're looking at, our not just the quality of the research, but what's coming out, but also the process. Are these researchers actually engaging with the patient all the way through, and are they thinking about it, and are they involving them, or are they just ignoring them? And so I think it does come into it in that kind of roundabout way.
And from my side, I could say, if you're thinking about patient expectation, sometimes the comments that are made during the peer review process relate to what has been measured. So yes, you need evidence, but someone might question, why have you collected this evidence as opposed to that? So in psychiatry, you've looked at these outcomes in terms of the reduction of symptoms of X, but what's important to me is whether I can go about my daily life, how my quality of life is, what the side effects were of that medication, which were quite difficult to deal with. And that's not being asked about. You've just asked about these outcome measures. So that would be a really useful thing for them to say, I appreciate the data that you've collected, but what about this data? Did you think about that? So it's asking for different evidence, and that obviously the peer review process is very late in the game, but this still comes back to authors and gives them something to think about for next time. And then at the moment, definitely in the UK, there's a lot more involvement of patients or people with lived experience in the design of research, and then you'll get that much earlier on, people saying, well, this is what's important to me, can you pay attention to that, please? And it's very useful. It helps to shape what research is done.
Okay, I'm afraid that we are quite out of schedule, so I think I must cut here. For me, it has been at least very interesting. We could be talking about it for quite a while, but I think we must stay on schedule. So thank you very much to all of you, and I hope to see you again in the next OAFI Congress or somewhere. Thank you so much, and thank you for the question also there. Thanks.
Thank you very much.